Okay, we're back, and it's COMP2068. It's the winter 2016 semester. It's week 11, part 2. The first part we kind of talked about of some organization for today and a little bit of project planning. And this second part, I want to do an intro, a little bit of an intro to Angular. I'm going to put up a PowerPoint presentation later on today as well. So let's talk about a little bit about this. So really, it's a front-end framework that we talked about, and you can see that if you're doing code school, you know, you're going to see that this is a front-end framework. It's an opinionated framework, which means that it's going to tell you to do things in a certain way. And some people don't like Angular because of that, because it's so opinionated. It's telling you that these are the methodologies you should use. This is how it should work. This is how things tie together, and so on. Right? That's why people like React instead, because it's less opinionated in some ways than Angular. It's more of a modular glue type framework than Angular's opinionated framework, right? So one of the things that Angular uses is called dependency injection, right? Where you have to specify your dependencies, you know, for each of your modules. I recommend that way if you're working with Angular that you use TypeScript, only because TypeScript is, number one, it's going to be used for Angular 2, and the second thing is it gives you an additional set of code hinting for your project that you would normally get, right? So Angular, I recommend TypeScript. I don't think it's, and if you don't use it like strict, if you don't make a TS file and you just make a JS file, please use TSD to give you the code hinting by itself. So if, say, do something like TSD install Angular, Angular route, Angular resource, install all those things so that when you do something like, you know, Angular.module, it's going to come up with some code hinting. It'll tell you what you're missing so that it'll help you with some troubleshooting. Okay, so again, the other concept that we review and we talk about on Code School here is two-way data binding, right? Which means as soon as there's a change to your model, then the front end gets changed. All right, that's what the concept is around. So we get dependency injection, two-way data binding. The idea of directives, what they do is basically when you create a directive with Angular, right? What it does is it injects data into HTML with JavaScript. At the end of the day, that's what it kind of creates. I want you to take a look at a project that I already have up, and I've kind of mentioned it to a couple people here. If you're looking at an example of an Angular project that works, on GitHub, I've put up on in Georgian College an older project that I did last year, one day when it actually resolves. It's called auth to do. That means this is an authorized to do, right? So you log in and you get a task list. In order for you to use this auth to do, and by the way, I fully encourage you to use this as your project template if you want, right? My only challenge with this one is I haven't had a chance to update it and make it work with Passport Local Mongoose. It uses Passport Local, which is actually more complex than the new version, right? But one thing it does is all the Angular views sit inside the public folder. So all your Angular views are in here, your to-dos and so on, your app.js, which houses your, or app.ts, which houses your Angular app definition. The other thing that this does, I just wanted to point this out as well, is it does a manual bootstrap. There's two ways of bootstrapping Angular. Don't confuse when I say bootstrap as in like Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about when you want to make Angular work and connect it to your files. There's two ways to do it. You can use ng-app inside your file somewhere in your index.html. That's one way. That's automatic bootstrapping. Okay. Then there's manual bootstrapping that happens through code, right? Where you don't have automatic bootstrapping. And so this is an example of how we do that. We do something like this. Angular element document, that's the document. When the document is ready, right, we want to bootstrap our ng-app onto the document, and you're going to use the main application module name is called app. This is manual bootstrapping, which I highly recommend. In the book that we use for this course, right, it uses manual bootstrapping. It's more efficient because you don't have every single page in your document requiring an Angular ng-app. You can actually use it inside of a header partial or a footer partial. So only the ones that have Angular attached to them have this are bootstrapped with Angular, because otherwise you have extra overhead for Angular that you don't need if you're not using Angular, all right, for your views, right? So there's a concept of manual bootstrapping and auto bootstrapping. Here's the thing. In this old file here that I've got a way of one page, a single page, right, module that does everything. Controller. It does, it details the scope object for different methods. Your edit, your cancel, your remove, and it also does a controller. Here's the controller, and even your service down here, right? Your routing. So Angular routing, Angular services, right? Everything in one. Here's your Angular service, your to-do factory, right? And what this to-do factory does is it eats up or consumes the JSON data that is produced from your Express site, okay? So again, this is an example of how you can combine Angular with Express, Mongo, and Node, right? If I go back and I look at what this looks like on the server side, here's server side. We've seen this before lots of times. You have your roots, right? And one of the roots in your index.html, or index.js, I'm sorry, goes down to the to-do list, which actually renders a to-dos root, where it goes to-dos index. Now, when to-dos index hits, it actually goes to here, inside your to-dos root, and to-dos index goes here, and the only way that this is going to show is if the user is authenticated. So we check to see if the user is authenticated, and when they are, instead of rendering a view, we post JSON data. So what the backend is doing is the factory is consuming the JSON data and applying it to the Angular front end, right? That's what's happening. And that's how you kind of combine Angular with Express, okay? Now there's many other ways to do this. It doesn't have to be done this way, but like I said, the complexity is a little higher. So when you use Angular, by the way, if you do use Angular as an option, I'm gonna give you a bonus because there's extra work involved, right? Not to say that you should be pushed to do that, okay? Please don't push yourself if you're not confident to do this because you don't want to fail with this, right? This is difficult stuff to do. And if you're already doing something difficult, this is going to make things even that much more complex, right? Because you're going to think about now making a single page application as opposed to multi-page applications. Because on the front end with Angular, it's really a single page application. How does this combine when it comes to using your views and partials? Well, Express is still being used. So here's your Express views. And take a look at your index.ejs. This is your index, right? Well, you're still using partials. Here's your user authentication, because that's the first page. In this particular case, you just authenticate with Express. And I only have a header. Notice I have a boot, and I have a footer. The boot partial is actually your Angular Bootstrap. So not all of them require the Angular piece to them. Only the ones that I have the boot partial on, right? Now you can choose to make this call whatever you like. This is the way I kind of solved the problem that I had. All right, if I go to to-dos, and notice there's, for the to-dos, I only have one template. And this one template has inside of it an Angular template inside of it. So here's your Angular template. And by the way, if you ever saw anything, who's familiar with handlebars at all? Right? Anybody ever do a handlebars as a front-end templating system? Probably not. I thought, Ari, didn't you do handlebars at one point?
I was learning it.
Okay, it's not easy to do, but it looks very similar to this, right? If you look at the type is text ng template, that's the exact same way handlebars handles templating, right? And if you notice, what it's saying is, when I go to do HTML, that's the route, right? When I use this, this is my ID, then I produce this template. And this is an Angular front-end template. But it's inside of my to-dos EJS file. So this is how we combine EJS on the back end with an Angular front end, right? The template actually sits here and is called upon by Angular when we need to call upon it. But it's all one big page. Okay, so how does this work, right? How does this work? So I have a working version of off to do. Let me show you what it looks like, right? So you see what I'm talking about here. So you can understand what to do to make it work. Just gonna download this thing for a second. So here's under COMP2068 here. I have a working version. Here's off to do. Where is it? Oh no, is it under me? Here it is. Here's off to do. And let's make it work. I'm going to put this inside my Visual Studio Code application. Here it is. And I'm going to show it to you. Now, one thing that also to note is there's no gulp, right? So there's no gulp running here. I mean, it's an older file that I put together last year when we did this same course, right? And if you notice that it breaks out node modules, and Bower RC, thank God, is there. But more or less, I have to run this manually with NodeMon, right? So if I go to view this thing in the terminal, sorry, let's try that again. View the thing in the terminal. You can see how it works. What you have to do to make it, oh man, what you have to do to make it work is, I meant to do something else, is you have to do an npm install, right, when you download it from GitHub, and you also have to do a Bower install. Those two things are required in order for you to make this this little project online work for you. You should download it and play with it. If you're really serious about making Angular, try it out and see how it works. Once you've done Bower install and npm install, you can certainly run it with NodeMon, right? It's going to run, now see how it says no Mongo connection, because it's listening for a local Mongo connection, right? I haven't connected it to Mongo Lab to make it modular for you guys, so you can connect it up to Mongo Lab or another service later, right? All right, so how do I fix that? I'm going to do new. And for the Mac, you have to run it with sudo. So sudo mongod, which runs Mongo on the front end. And now I'm going to restart NodeMon on the back end, and we're running. Okay, that means it's running on localhost 3000. So if I go to localhost 3000, it looks like this. So user authentication with you know, Passport and Mongo and all that stuff. I'm going to register, and there's a net registration view that looks very similar to what we have, where I was showing you off last week, right? So let's register a new user. We'll call him Conan, right? At hyperborea.com, right? And his new username is Conan with a C-O-A or lowercase, and his password is I don't know, 12345. Because he's a really inventive kind of guy, right? And his display name is Conan, Conqueror, right? Or the King. Oh, the Conan the King. Right? No exclamation mark. Okay, submit. So when he logs in, notice there's some users here. I come into my user view, right? But here's hello Conan the King, right? It says it up here and back down here too. But if I go to my to-do list, this is the Angular front end. This is now an Angular view, right? Okay, let's set up some to-dos for Conan, right? So let's say, you know, he's going to have a task 1, you know, kill your enemies, right? That's like to do, right? So that's the task that I want to put in. So here's my new task, create. And then the next task, right? Task 2, see them driven before you. It's actually from Conan the books, right? I won't do the third one, which is hear the lamentation of the woman, but that's just the way it is, right? Those are the 3 tasks, right? For the Conan the Barbarian. But so you've got a couple tasks here, right? Well, now that I got a couple tasks, I can complete one task, like kill your enemies. So that's done, that task, right? I can also go in there, edit the task, right? So this is done, look at, right in line here. It's a single page application that actually shows the task, the edit view right here. And then when I'm done, like for example, I want to remove this task, that task is gone and it's in line. It's persistent and works right here. What's really happening on the back end is because I'm logged in, I can see the to-dos, all of the to-dos in a JSON file. And I did this on purpose. If I go to-dos, this is what the JSON data looks like. So the JSON data is being displayed by the router, right? The express route. And on the front end, Angular is taking this data, spinning it, and filtering it so only the user that's logged in can see his own views. Now I made it like this, so anyone can see it. But really, I could secure this and say only the user can see his own JSON data, right? Because that would be insecure. If I can see all everyone's data, then it doesn't matter if I'm logged in or not. I can see everybody. These are all the tasks for everybody, right? But you can see how it's being housed in the database. Now, when you do it, you're going to see only one task because you don't have as many as I do. I had lots of users in here, and I gave some sample data in here so you guys can see it. Questions around this, right? So simple to do a task list that's done with Angular, and it's persistent. Okay, so if you notice, if I click on this, that's completed, you know, as an example, and I move to something else, users, here's my users, and I come back to my to-do list, still looks like completed because it's getting it from the database. There's a completed, not completed, you know, thing. And if I log out, I'm logged out, and if I try and do to-dos, right, to-dos, it's going to take me to log in again because I'm logged out. I can't see my to-do list unless I'm logged in, right? So that's your Angular app. you can take a look at it, dissect it, use it as a base if you want to. I caution you, however, that the back end, when it comes to on the server side, when it comes to config, your passport configuration, here's your passport configuration, is much more complex. As you can see, it's like 100 lines of code compared to the 10 lines of code we used, right, in passport local mongoose, right? It's much more complex. It's split out so that you have to almost have your own passport configuration file to make it work, whereas the other one's incorporated in, and it's much easier. On the plus side, you have a little bit more control from a routing perspective. So if I was to look at things like when I log in, and if I wanted to try and make Conan again, or let's say I made the wrong username, so Conan, and my password is wrong, right? And I log in, it's going to say incorrect username. And if I put the same one in, so Conan lowercase, right, and try again and log in, incorrect password. So it does all these things that are built in. These are flash messages that work for this view, right? If I try and register, and I try and register the user again, the same one, so Conan at Hyperborea, Borea.com. Why did I make it so long? And username is Conan, and my password 12345. So I'm trying to register the same user again. My display name is Conan the King, right? And I press submit. Username already taken. So another flash message to show you that you can't submit the same username over and over again, right? So all those views, those are all working. If I go to log in and I finally log in, so again it's Conan 12345. Almost done.
Okay.
And if I click login, right, I'm into my user, and I can actually modify my users too, like brackets. I don't want this guy. I want him to disappear. Goodbye. So he's gone. And you know what? I'm unhappy with Conan anymore. I can probably get rid of him too, but I'm logged in. That would cause a problem. Questions around simple full stack stuff that we're doing? Do you have to use Angular? No. If you're going to use Angular, here's a template for you guys to use, right? If you want to use it or at least look at it. And remember, tonight I'm going to put up a little a lab up on Blackboard, and we'll continue with this Angular stuff over the next several weeks. I'll do a little bit of Angular stuff, like let's say an hour of Angular, and then we're going to go right into project meetings until the end. Okay? Any questions before we depart? Have a great weekend, and good luck on your first submission, which is due Friday at midnight.
Wow, you let them get this far into their term before they submit.